Don't roll your eyes when we talk about it being Black History Month. It's an important conversation.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
That's a weird way to start the show, right? What do you mean? Why would I roll my eyes? Well, if you ask the question, why would I roll my eyes, then you're good. But if I caught some of you saying, oh, and it repeats some of the garbage I had to deal with on the radio the other day, which is, hey, Dan, why don't we have a White History Month? Or are you proud to be white? And my head starts to split wide open because I wonder when that happens if we've made any progress. So sorry to kind of get you off balance to start the program. My guests are probably thinking, ooh boy, this is a roller coaster I don't need to be on today or tonight. But sometimes that's the biorhythm. Glad to have you in though. Thank you very much for tuning into my state of mind. Those of you who watch the Friday program regularly, and thank you for doing so, you probably know that we record Friday programs on Thursday for production purposes, and so all the news coming out of Florida with the shooting, all of that stuff is somewhat obsolete for you now if I said anything about it tonight. So we'll catch up on that coming up on Monday and all of next week and try to do some good programming on the conversation that we need to have about weapons, safety, mental health, all of those things, okay? Theme for tonight, don't roll your eyes, is this. If I could put my glasses on, I could actually read it. Black History Month events in Rhode Island. And I think it's important that we establish Elon and Del here and what they do and what's going on, but we're not going to have a public service announcement conversation here. I mean, I want to put some events up if we could do that just to explain some of the things that are going on. But let's say hi to my guests first. One thing we should. Del, welcome.
Thank you.
Elon, welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to have you. Okay, now let's go to the screen. Tell me what these things are real quick, and then we'll talk about what your organization does, and then we'll get into some, I think, pretty meaty conversation here. February 25th is a commemoration, right? Mm-hmm. Tell me, quickly, yeah.
The 25th is a commemoration of three people, of Absalom Jones, who was an Episcopal priest, of Peter Quire, who was the founder of St. John's Episcopal Church in Newport, and of course Martin Luther King. So it's an opportunity and a church service to commemorate all three significant figures in the history of blacks in America.
Okay, and on March 8th, that's my birthday, by the way. Cards, letters.
Yes.
I don't usually count it anymore, but what does that mean? What is reconciliation as expressed in the arts? What is that?
Well, let me give you first a little background. I think it will help.
Okay.
We are doing a series of events that speak to the importance of reconciliation. So we did one in January at Grace Episcopal Church, and that event we had faith leaders to talk about what reconciliation means in their context. So we had a mufti, we had a swami, we had an Episcopal bishop, a bishop, not an Episcopal bishop, and a rabbi. And they both talked about reconciliation from their traditions. So that was the first in the series. Then we had one.
Sounds like an old joke.
Yes, I know.
Mufti and swami, priest, are in an airplane.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
I've had that happen before.
Yeah.
The second event in the series, though, so we did what I called a foundational understanding of what reconciliation means. But how do you experience reconciliation? So the second event in the series, which was a week ago, last Thursday, was to talk about, well, how do you experience reconciliation in music? What is the music of reconciliation? You know, music is important to our lives. So using music as a way to express reconciliation. So we had two Chopin pieces played by some students from the Rhode Island Philharmonic Music School. We had a choir from a synagogue in Barrington. We had a soloist who sang some spirituals. And we had the Gay Men's Choir sing about reconciliation from their perspective. And then we had an organ and brass ensemble play music. So that was expression of reconciliation music. In March, We're going to have a program that talks about reconciliation as expressed in the visual and graphic arts. So what would that look like if you were to see it?
What would it look like?
So there's going to be a variety
You're
of
the
artists.
curator of this business.
Yes.
What does it look like?
Well, thankfully, we have a lot of wonderful volunteers, including Dell, who brings to us people from all around Rhode Island, and in this case, different parts of New England, too, to work with us on different programs, including this one in particular. So we're going to have artists who are giving their own interpretation of what reconciliation might possibly look like.
All right, well,
We've got an important...
Stop right there.
Yeah.
What's reconciliation mean?
Now you've hit the real
Well, that's
question.
what we're here for.
Exactly.
Not to just run down
No,
the
no, no.
itinerary.
No, that's
what does
important.
reconciliation mean in this context?
In this context, it means people coming together, sharing their experiences. Reconciling means coming together, not necessarily agreeing, but agreeing to at least understand those differences are, and finding a way to live together. So reconciliation means hearing your story, your experience, whatever that is, and you're listening to my story, and finding the common ground between the two of us. If you were to ask me for a hard definition, the analogy I frequently use is reconciliation is very similar to grace. You know what it is when you experience it, but what does it mean? Well, it comes out of the experience of having been given grace, undeserved, unearned kind of gratitude.
If I want to reconcile data,
Yes.
I'm doing the best I can to come to a common data point.
Or understanding
It's
what
like,
the
okay,
differences
I got some numbers here.
Yep.
And the budget.
Yep.
I got some numbers here in the budget. I
Yep.
got to do a budget reconciliation.
Yep.
I got to make them both work.
Good.
I got to be on the same page.
Yes.
Is that what this is?
In your analogy, it means looking at where are the discrepancies between what you expected to see and what you saw. So you're trying to reconcile, like your bank account. What did I spend?
Every month, people reconcile their checkbook.
Absolutely.
Sometimes they come up with the right number.
Absolutely.
Sometimes your spouse says,
Yes.
I'm 400 down in the checking account. I don't know where it is. And I say, I don't know.
But with people, with relationships, it's much more complicated. Listen, we all reconcile relationships every day. Families, sons, daughters, wives, cousins, because you have differences. The problem isn't that you have a difference. The problem is when that difference leads to complications, when they don't understand each other. So that's the importance of having a deliberate exercise experience of trying to reconcile.
Sounds deep.
It is deep.
And our organization is really focusing in on racial reconciliation, thinking about what has been broken in our nation's history when it comes to issues related to race. And so we're really also bringing people back to conversations about slavery as being an original sin of the United States. And so once we start to address what has been broken, we can start thinking about what must be reconciled. And it's really all toward getting us to the end of fairness and justice for all.
Okay, two meaty conversations.
Yes.
Let me just, so last week we had the situation in town. Just put up the headline if you can, on the pamphlet. Only now have I seen one Brown student who put out some missive that Lexi sent me today that says that she saw, or he saw, a bunch of these pamphlets that were distributed in the Fox Point area of the city. Frankly, I've been on kind of like this mystery hunt. I haven't seen the pamphlets. All I saw was a picture of a pamphlet online, and I almost think someone like spooked everybody.
Yeah.
But it is just, it's a horror show, I think, for most reasonable people to see that stuff even goes on anymore.
Yeah.
Right? That there would be some dump into town or online to identify individuals, use the word Negro in a derogatory way. That's just the whole thing. It's so exhausting, I think, for fair-minded people. So I think most people are reconciled to the idea that just it. Can we just stop? Is that good enough?
No.
No.
Not at all.
When we come back, we'll find out why. Stay with us. So there's some scenes from the rally at Fox Point last week, and Elon, you were there.
Yes.
So when I ask you if most people are disgusted over a pamphlet drop or a social media distribution of that kind of a ridiculous pamphlet drop, and I say, is that good enough? And you say no, explain why.
Well, really, what's interesting about this whole thing to me is that, for one, we couldn't see everything that was happening with the pamphlet. We can't see the inside. A couple of people who did see the inside.
Well, we just saw it online.
Oh, I did not get a chance to see the inside of the pamphlet.
There's the kid that got jammed up in a fight with the vice principal at Central High School. His mother mischaracterized in terms of, you know, their status and what they've said, and then a couple of young men who have been accused of pretty serious crimes and racial epithets and all that kind of thing. It's all part of the same syndrome. But even so, you know, going after Jim Vincent and use of the term Negro in a non-historic fashion, blah blah blah. I mean, it's all designed to inflame.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me go back to the question: if most people think it's ridiculous and disgusting, is that enough?
I say it's not enough, and I think the reason, I think it's important to explore the reason why we think it's not enough. We have difficulty talking about race in this country. We don't want to talk about it. It's unpleasant, it's painful for everybody. What the Center for Reconciliation tries to do, however, is to provide an environment where you can take on this very difficult subject. You know, there's an interesting quote from Desmond Tutu, which says, we can have reconciliation in the context of South Africa, but we have to talk about what happened, which causes us to have the need for reconciliation. Until you talk about that.
Why do you think it's difficult?
Yes.
You've created a postulate for this conversation. Right? The given is it's difficult.
Yes.
You think it's difficult?
Yes.
I don't find it difficult at all. I don't find it difficult at all. In fact, I soak it up. I enjoy it. I think it's intellectually stimulating.
You were part of a small percentage of the population.
Okay, so why?
Because my sense is that I'm not throwing roses at you, but you engage in dialogue. That's your job.
Yeah.
Right.
You engage people. And you engage people on difficult subjects. The average person would prefer not to engage, at least on this difficult subject, because of our history. The history is painful because in order to begin to have an understanding of how difficult this subject was for black people in this country, we have to acknowledge that we treated human beings not as human beings. Who would sell a family? Who would tear apart a family? And who would do it for money? And that's what's so difficult about it. But we have to talk about it because it is our history. We also need to talk, incidentally, I don't want to vary, but we need to talk about Native Americans, because my son sent me a recent note, which essentially was online someplace, and it's from Native Americans, and it says, we're going to give you the right to live here, Americans, 270 million of you, without a pass. That was said in jest, but there's some seriousness about it. In other words, we haven't talked enough about that.
So there's a guilt thing. There's a guilt thing that.
Well, also it causes us to take a different look at American history, which includes our ancestors a lot of times.
Yeah.
It also causes us to question what we learned in school, what we learned from our parents, what we learned from the media.
If we learned it in school.
Exactly.
If we learned it in school. Because we do, I'm afraid, a dismally poor job in dealing with this subject and the complexity of it.
I don't think we have enough trained educators to do justice with it.
I agree. And one of the things
so that's why you have a textbook with a couple of chapters on black history and some of the basic stuff that we all got.
Yep.
You know, and maybe revised up through Martin Luther King, and then maybe it's revised up through Barack Obama, and there you go. And because it is such a sensitive matter.
It is difficult.
I don't know that believe me. You give a teaching certificate to a young person who's going into high school teaching.
Yep.
You think they're capable of handling that conversation?
No.
No.
Well, it's
Absolutely.
really a lot of the issues are around training, just like you were saying. In my conversations with teachers here in Rhode Island, my conversations with teachers in different parts of the country, they're not learning in a lot of the teacher programs how to have conversations about race across racial lines.
And Dan, let me tell you why I think this is so critical. We're living with the vestiges, the legacy of that history, and we haven't dealt with it. My view, the opportunity for this country to really be great, is when we can reconcile our current day patterns of how we treat people. We don't do red lighting the way we used to do it, but we have other subtle ways of expressing the kind of hidden attitudes that continue to exist. And until we talk about those, the fact that they are there, we won't make progress.
You know, I think there's some interesting reasons why this is difficult for people. We put all sorts of rules on the conversation.
Yes.
While we both agree that putting a pamphlet into a community that has the word Negro on it in a way intended to hurt is a weapon.
Yes.
The use of the term Negro is
the other
N-word.
Yes.
But then you get the N-word,
yes.
the other N-word. White America, and I'd say that, I'm part of it, white America is really confused. Every HBO comedy special is, you know, I watched, what's the name of the Def Comedy Jam or whatever? A series of black comedians who, okay, by the time I was done, the only word I could remember was the N-word.
Yes.
I know I can't use it. I use it here on the air. Guess where I'm going?
Yep.
To the unemployment line.
Yes.
Listen, that's an example. But we put a lot of pressure on dialogue, on public discourse.
Yes.
We are quick to even if I think what you're trying to do is wonderful. This environment that you create for it, it's a safe environment.
Yes.
I hope that means everybody can say anything they want at any time about anything without being chased out of the joint.
Yes.
So,
whatever the joint happens to be.
Well,
so I will add that whenever we have race dialogue programs, and most of our programs center in conversations about race, we do talk about how to have a conversation in a way that opens people up to continuing the conversation and how you can use certain words that might close the conversation down. And so using racial slurs will often close the conversation down, even if you're trying to use it in a historical context. So using a term like the N-word, for instance, especially if it's coming from a white person, can be very painful and cause visceral reactions for many Black Americans. And so it's really important to be thinking about the ways in which certain words can be used to either help or to hurt.
And I think when you're studied as you are on it, establishing those protocols is important.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that.
And that's why we talk about
and I don't want
how
to go
to
on
have
a tangent here because I want to get your slavery perspective because I know you do a lot of work on that. But just a final thought on this real quick, and then we'll have you back for 22 more shows. Don't you understand, what I hear on my radio phone lines is that a lot of white America is just feeling confused, frustrated, and don't feel like they want to do the work when the intra-black community conversation is not public about the N-word, for instance.
Right.
I mean, Bill Cosby was on his way, then he got jammed up.
Yeah.
Who else is doing it?
Yeah.
Nobody.
I know.
So Ta-Nehisi Coates has there's a wonderful video of him explaining the history of the N-word and why white people are really not supposed to be using that term these days, especially if they want to be considered someone who is progressive.
Does he also write about why Black America can and it's okay?
He does, actually.
Good.
He wrote about it in both of his books.
Good. Give me that link. All right, we'll come back because we'll lose the show. We'll be right back. Funny of it, the amount of it. Okay. You know, I love these conversations because they're important, that they can get off track and you end up wanting to reschedule for 30 shows. I'm not kidding. What work you're doing on slavery? Talk to me about that.
Sure.
What's happening here in terms of reconciliation, slavery? Because I'll tell you, again, I go to the radio show and say, listen, white America has a systemic, not a personal, not you, Joe, not you, Bill, but a systemic reconciliation to do on slavery. If we could just admit that, we can get somewhere. Am I right?
Yes.
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 Got it.
Yes.
All right, that's the end of the show. Thank you for coming. But right?
No, you're absolutely right.
But how do you communicate that? How do you do that?
So we have a variety of programs that are specifically...
Not to make it personal, to make it systemic.
Absolutely.
Yes. So the importance is to really think about why slavery started, how slavery started in the United States, the fact that it was part of a worldwide system of forced labor that was going on. Yeah. So we address that. We talk about how the term slave started in the first place, that it originated actually in the Slavic countries of Europe, We talk about how there was slavery in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, that this was a problem that occurred all around the world, and how the transatlantic slave trade that brought slavery brought racialized slavery to the United States, how that changed forced labor here, and the legacy that connects that to who gets to live where, who gets to go to what school, how people are promoted, whether they get a job in the first place, how the legacy of that and how that causes continual problems.
Well, I think that's
hundreds of years
probably
later.
really interesting and deep research that earnest people should be interested in.
Yes.
What's the executive summary on what it results in? What's it result in? What statement of conclusion does all of that research result in 10 seconds, so we can ask another question?
So it results in a lack of intergenerational wealth in African American families, because after spending 250 years without the ability to accumulate wealth, descendants like me had no ability to receive any wealth from several generations
And so
later.
it's just not cured.
It's not
It is
cured.
definitely not cured.
White
There's also a
guy
long
watching the show
misunderstanding.
says, "I didn't do it.
It's true.
I didn't do it. Get off it. Look at all the guys in the NBA making all that money." I hear it all the time.
They're the exceptions. This guy that you're talking about.
And people know that.
I
but you know
understand.
what I'm
Of course,
talking
of course.
about. Yeah.
But this guy that you're talking about benefits unfairly simply because he can say he's white, whereas a black person continues to suffer the disparities.
I don't know. My kid didn't get into college because they had a number of black kids in there.
Right.
Which
Really?
is based on
No,
stereotypes.
I'm role
Yes.
playing. I'm giving you the role. I'm telling you. Right?
And I understand. Of course, that's true.
I
Yeah.
could.
Yeah.
I could participate as not a moderator, but a provocateur in one of your forums, just repeating what I've
you've
heard
heard.
on the
Yeah.
air
Yes.
perpetually,
Yeah.
which is the evidence of this non-reconciliation disconnect.
Exactly.
So you may find our walking tours really interesting then. So starting in May through basically as soon as it starts getting cool in the fall, we have walking tours of the neighborhood of College Hill here in Providence, and it's about 2 hours exploring how Providence and Rhode Island more specifically is connected to the international slave trade, and how all of that affects how we treat each other and live today. At the very end of the tour, I actually hand out slips of paper to all the participants with stereotypes that about slavery. And so it's really to get, part of it for me is fact checking to make sure that people actually heard what I said. But it's also to get them to think more deeply about some of the stereotypes
Are
that
you
we
a
receive
teacher
from
by
slavery.
trade? Yeah, by instinct, anyway.
I am definitely an educator.
What did I just
yes.
do for the last 2 hours? Stop looking at all the beautiful buildings. Pay attention to what I'm saying. All that information about that will be on our website at foxprovidence.com.
Yes.
Final thought, 15 seconds. That's all I got.
This is an important work. We are trying to encourage the community to participate in it. It's sited. It's located at the cathedral. There's a specific reason for that. Cathedrals have traditionally been at the intersection of the secular and the sacred. They've always provided sanctuary. We're providing that safe space where we can have those kinds of conversations.
All the info is on foxprovidence.com. Final word when we come back. Didn't roll your eyes. Good job. Again, go to the website and learn more about this programming that focuses on reconciliation. 34 years in the college basketball business, and Tim O'Shea said, "I've had it this week." We'll meet him Monday. Have a great weekend. Good night.